Well, it's week 14. Welcome to the Most Accurate Podcast. In fact, week 14 kicked off last night. We are recording this on a Friday. I'm Anthony Stalter. John Paulsen, my partner in crime, joins me as always from his wonderful home in California. John, this is the time of year with me living in St. Louis that I become very jealous of you and the fact that you live on the West Coast. How are you today?
Yeah, I won't tell you today's high, but it's definitely over 70. Doing well. Enjoying getting towards the end of the season and ramping into the playoffs, hoping that we can get some subscribers, some championships this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk normal podcast for us. We'll hit a little bit on the Thursday night football game. What a mess that was, especially if you're a Raiders fan. If you're a Baker Mayfield truther, I guess that final drive did some things for you. But we will spend a little bit of time talking about the Thursday night football game. We'll get into the biggest fantasy football storylines. A lot of injuries to get through. Kenneth Walker will lead that discussion, but we will get to Joe Mixon and Lamar Jackson, do an injury roundup as well. Our sleeper sneaky start of the week, John will get to. Obviously, we'll hand out some sneaky starts and then get into our breakout receiver model and see who's popping. But John, it was Baker Mayfield's night last night. Unbelievable finish to that game. It wasn't pretty from start to finish. The Rams won 17-16 in a game, quite frankly, they had no business winning. Derek Carr was not terrible, but very ineffective. And there was a couple of drives that ended either in field goals or he threw just a pitiful interception right before half. So Derek Carr didn't do the Raiders any favors last night. But from a fantasy perspective, Cam Akers now two games in a row now where he is productive. And what are your thoughts on Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, so Wolford got the start, right? I saw him. He was supposed, but he didn't attempt to pass, so he must have been in that first drive, just handing the ball off. Once again, I'm not going to watch this game. I'm not going to spend 3 hours watching the Raiders and the Rams play with third string quarterbacks playing for the Rams, but no Aaron Donald because he's the main reason to watch the Rams. This was just a snapshot into my evening. I think it was 16-3, and I was like, oh, this, whatever. This is about what I expected. And then next thing I do, I refresh the box score. I come back, and the Rams won 17-16, and looks like it was a late touchdown drive for Baker Mayfield. 230 yards and a touchdown for him. So maybe a fresh start here again, another fresh start. Sean McVay can work his magic. We do know that Sean McVay is a good football coach, a good quarterback coach. He did wonders with Jared Goff. Did well with Matthew Stafford, even though Matthew Stafford, I think we can all agree, was a really physically talented quarterback, thrower of the football. So not surprising that he had a really good year. And we don't know what his status is. So maybe this is a chance for Mayfield to sort of resurrect his career and get it going again. I mean, we do have a history of Mayfield being a competent NFL starter. It was not that way in Carolina this year. He obviously had a really poor rapport with the best receiver on the Panthers, DJ Moore. And we were happy as DJ Moore managers that Mayfield has moved on. But I guess I'm happy for him. I like to see underdog stories. I guess he's an underdog now. And then just looking at the backfield, yes, it looks like Cam Akers, but based on what we saw last week and this week, he's back atop the backfield, which is interesting. He did spend some time away from the team, and there must have been something to sort out there, but now he looks like he's back, at least for the last few games here where they're just trying to play out the season. They're winning games and getting themselves into worse draft position. Got what we thought we were going to get from Josh Jacobs, but the Raiders passing game, just looking at it, just dreadful. I mean, 137 yards, 2 interceptions. From what I've read, the Raiders were super trying not to lose, not really trying to win the game. And, you get 3 for 71 out of Devontae Adams, and that's just about it. And it's not even what we want from Devontae in this situation. So kind of a weird game. And it's just, if you would have fast forwarded from week 1 and looked at this box score, you would have wondered what the hell is going on with Baker Mayfield quarterbacking the Rams, Ben Skornek leading the Rams in receiving, no Cooper Kupp, no Allen Robinson, Tutu Atwell, 5 for 50, Van Jefferson, 2 for 44 and 1, and Tyler Higbee only getting 2 catches.
Oh yeah, it was ugly. It was what, if you didn't watch the game, it was kind of what you expected outside of the fact that Baker Mayfield did lead the game. I mean, the throw that he made to Van Jefferson on what would be the game-winning touchdown was outstanding. The other play was Skoranek. I mean, Skoranek blows up, he makes an unbelievable catch, and it extends the drive. So Mayfield can make that throw to Van Jefferson, but it was ugly. I guess if anybody can kind of figure it out or help Baker Mayfield figure it out, it would be Sean McVay. But people may disagree with this because for some reason people seem to really like Baker Mayfield, I guess from his Oklahoma days. But Jared Goff's a better quarterback. He's I'm not saying leaps and bounds a better quarterback, but he's a better quarterback. And Sean McVay ultimately decided I've got to find somebody that will actually elevate my offense, which is why they made the trade for Matthew Stafford. So, yeah, I think Baker may have his best shot with Sean McVay, but I don't know how much that's saying. But nonetheless, it's impressive when you get traded, when you get picked up on waiver claims, and you've got less than 3 days to run an NFL offense, and you win that game. So, kudos to Baker Mayfield, hat tip to him, and hat tip to the Rams. All right, John, biggest fantasy storylines for Week 14. I know a lot of people are going to be really interested in your thoughts on these key players. Kenneth Walker did not practice this week. Who's going to lead the Seattle backfield in touches?
Yeah, and I would expect Walker to miss based on what I understand of the injury, but we're keeping an eye on that. It's possible that he could turn around and get a limited and get maybe play this week. But right now, I'm planning on him missing and don't have him in the rankings. If he does play, he's going to be in the top 12 again. He's an RB1 when he plays. But Tony Jones was the only fully healthy running back on the roster, on the active roster, although Travis Homer did practice in full yesterday. So that's a good sign for his availability. And he has been ahead of Tony Jones, DJ Dallas. He was basically the third down back with Walker before Homer got injured. So I think from a PPR standpoint, he's probably the best bet for in terms of floor because of his role in the passing game is pretty secure. I would assume 3 or 4 catches for him and maybe he gets some carries too. They haven't shown a willingness or a desire to give him a lot of carries, but if you look at Tony Jones, if he's your other option, he's got a career 2.7 yards per carry. So it's not like, we're talking about Derrick Henry coming in 5 yards a carry and we want to get him a bunch of touches on first and second down. So I would, right now I've got it Jones at 34, Homer at 37, but I need to adjust for this full practice on Thursday. And I think I'm going to move Homer ahead of Jones. And then the other wild card is that they've got a few guys on the practice squad that are probably better than Tony Jones. Wayne Gallman, they just signed, Darwin Thompson, and there is a third that I'm blanking on, but I do thankfully have the roster up. The third is Godwin Igwebuike, who make sure you watch the video of me try to say that and my head pop up trying to say his last name. So I don't know. I'm watching to see who they activate off this group because I think probably Gallman is the safest player to just pick up and in terms of the Seahawks, give him a first, second down role. I think he's proven himself the most of these guys that we have with Homer probably in a third down role, but they might decide to go and feed the ball to Homer, although he's coming off of injury. So I don't feel real confident in any of these players right now, but I think Homer would be the PPR play if I had to pick one.
John, what do you think about the Buffalo backfield situation? You got Devin Singletary, who has found the end zone a lot over the last month, 14 carries for him last week in that win over the Lions, and he finishes with 72 yards. He added eight receptions in that game. But James Cook, that's the back that a lot of people are kind of focusing on now. And I missed the Patriots game. Excuse me. It was a Thursday night game. Singleton rushed for 13 times, 51 yards, and he had a touchdown. But James Cook, he's a more explosive back. He's somebody that continues to kind of mix in a little bit. But is he a safe start this week against the Jets?
The Jets have a pretty good defense. They're really, really pretty good against the pass. so against the run, I guess, in terms of adjusted fantasy points allowed. But Cook, it does seem like, based on what happened last week, 20 touches to Singletary's 13. I believe that the touches in the first three quarters was like 19-8 or 18-9. So there was a bigger ratio when the game was still in doubt. Singletary got some carries late in that game in the fourth quarter to kind of pad his numbers a little bit. So it does seem to me like they have shifted this backfield to James Cook as the RB1, as the lead back. Singletary will definitely get work, but you're probably going to see a rotation, and it might be a hot hand situation where if Cook doesn't play that well and only gets 2 yards in his first 2 carries, then maybe Singletary comes in and ends up leading that backfield in touches. But as of right now, if I had both players, I'm starting James Cook, certainly in PPR, half PPR, given his ability to catch the ball. And if we look at the Bills and what they've done over the last year or so, trying to secure a passing down back, they signed J.D. McKissick, or they came to terms with J.D. McKissick, and then he decided to go back to play for the Commanders. I don't know why you do that, but he did that. And then they decided to go out and draft a passing down back in James Cook. They also went out and traded for Nyheim Hines, another passing down back. So it does seem like they want to get their running backs catching the ball more. And James Cook can certainly do that, as evidenced by his 6 for 6 for 41 yards in the last game. So I would start Cook over Singletary, but I think Singletary is still, sort of a flex option, because there is a chance that he could end up with 18 touches or something like that.
What's your take on the Bengals backfield situation? Because Joe Mixon appears like he's going to come back this week. He's missed the last couple of games now. The Bengals have the Cleveland Browns, so it's a really good matchup. But Samaje Perine has played well in Mixon's stead. I mean, he was the clear RB1 when Mixon was out. Had a really good game last week against Kansas City. We know that Zach Taylor likes to mix Perine in when it comes to the passing game, the obvious third down situations. For me personally, I don't think Joe Mixon needs to come off the field. He's that talented, but give credit where credit's due. Perine has played well. Is Perine startable though with Mixon back?
I think in this game against the Browns, they're 32nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. So this is sort of where we look sometimes for sneaky starts, especially in a short week like this with 6 teams on bye. You look for those second running backs in. I wouldn't say this is a murky backfield, but the fact that Mixon's coming back from injury and Perine has played so well, he might see a few extra snaps or an extra drive or two that he wouldn't have otherwise seen if not for Mixon's injury. And on top of it, you have a fantastic matchup against the Browns. So I think he is startable. I don't know that he's trustworthy, but he definitely could end up with 8 to 12 touches, and in a great matchup against Cleveland, he's certainly capable of scoring points. I mean, he obviously had 3 receiving touchdowns against Pittsburgh back in week 11. I believe that was with Mixon healthy, or at least active. He had another reception touchdown against the Jets in week 3, and obviously had the great game last week. So he is averaging more yards per carry than Mixon. He's about 4.42. Mixon's at 3.8 something. So they might decide to work him in a little bit more. I do think that Mixon is still the lead, by far and away the lead back in Cincy, but it might be an extra series or 2 where Perine's in there.
John, moving on to Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, unlikely to play this weekend against the Steelers. He's likely to miss the next couple of weeks after suffering the knee injury from the first quarter last week in that win over the Broncos. I'm in a situation. You and I have a league together, and I have Lamar Jackson as my starting quarterback. And I had the choice to either pick up Daniel Jones or Huntley, the backup for the Ravens. I went with Daniel Jones, but what are your thoughts on Tyler Huntley? Is he a trustworthy start for QB needy fantasy managers?
Yeah, he's relatively trustworthy because of the rushing floor. He's got 4 starts last year. He had 40 yards, 73 yards, 54 yards, and 72 yards rushing. So that's a nice floor. And then he had 2 touchdowns in week 15 against the Packers, of course, who are always surprised when a rushing quarterback can run the ball. But the passing yardage isn't great. I mean, he 219, 215, 197, 141. 3 rush, 3 or 2 passing touchdowns in those 4 starts. He does okay when he comes in relief of Lamar Jackson. I think he and Daniel Jones are actually really close this week. I have Jones at 14 with a bad matchup against Philly, but you could see that, the Giants having to throw the ball more than they'd want to if the Eagles jump out to a lead there. Huntley, 19th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the quarterbacks matchup against the Steelers. So I feel like they're actually pretty similar players, low volume passers, the ability to run the ball, maybe get you 50 to 70 yards rushing and a touchdown. And that's a pretty good floor, I think, for both players.
All right, let's do our injury roundup now. I'll go through quickly the names that other fantasy managers might be interested in from an injury standpoint. We'll start off with Mike Williams. Full practice on Thursday, despite having the ankle injury. So it looks like Mike Williams might return this week when the Chargers host the Dolphins. Saquon Barkley, limited with a neck injury. Should fantasy managers be worried? Beat writer Art Stapleton said that the situation is, quote, something to monitor, but doesn't sound like something that should cause serious concern at this point. T. Higgins, limited Thursday with the hamstring injury, midweek downgrade, not great. Geno Smith, limited in practice with the throwing shoulder, midweek downgrade, same deal here. Cortland Sutton did not practice Thursday with the hamstring injury, not looking good according to head coach Nathaniel Hackett. Amari Cooper, limited Thursday with the hip injury. Leonard Fournette, limited Thursday with the foot injury. DeAndre Hopkins did not practice on Thursday because he was sick. Treylon Burks, the rookie wide receiver for the Titans, did not practice due to a concussion. And quarterback Trevor Lawrence did not practice Wednesday or Thursday because of a toe injury, although he said he expects to play. What are your thoughts on these players?
I think you summed up their statuses. I have Mike Williams back in the rankings. He was with that full practice. It looks like he's on track to play. I don't have him ranked exactly where he would be if I was confident he was fully healthy, ready to roll. I have him ranked 26th right now. In a short week, that's fairly low for him. But you have Josh Palmer there and Keenan Allen back. So I think he's a reasonable start, and you definitely have some upside there, but he's got some downside too. I think looking at his game log, he has 4 games with less than 20 yards receiving, which is definitely a low floor. But I feel like he's close to full health or getting closer to full health. Just worry that he suffers another re-injury like he did. He played 6 snaps and left the game after 1 catch in that last game that he played. Barkley doesn't sound like it's too much to worry about, but Matt Breida would probably be a smart pickup if you have Barkley and are worried about it. I don't know that I would go out and grab Breida, as an injury stash or attrition player if I didn't have Barkley. It just depends on who I'm cutting, but he does look like he's fairly close to starting if something goes sideways with this neck injury. And neck injuries are kind of tricky, but it could just be like a sore neck and nothing really to worry about. Midweek downgrades, we've gone over. I don't know how many times we've talked about midweek downgrades, Anthony, but they definitely make my ears perk up, my little ears that are too small for my head. T. Higgins, sometimes these things end up being like serious injuries and then they don't practice on Friday or limited at Friday and can't play. And then sometimes it's just, I felt something in my hammy. Let's shut it down for today and come back on Friday and everything's fine. So it really is the Friday practice that matters for these guys. Smith, I'm not too worried about with the throwing shoulder, but we'll see. Higgins, not too worried about, but we'll see. I think, Sutton is not going to play. I don't have him in the rankings. Amari Cooper probably will play. I still have him in the rankings. Fournette, the thing that gets me about this one is that it's a new injury. So he was dealing with a hip injury the last couple of weeks, and now he's got this foot injury. And, foot injuries for running backs can be alarming. So, Rachaad White, if he happens to be on the waiver wire somehow, make sure you have him or make another plan for Leonard Fournette. Make sure you have a backup plan for him. I'm not worried about the illness with Hopkins, probably going to play. Burks, I don't expect him to play with a concussion. And then Trevor Lawrence, DNP Wednesday, Thursday, alarming. Toe injuries are tough, but quarterbacks can kind of play through those a little bit better than running backs or receivers because they're not cutting as much. But he did say he expects to play, so we'll see if that comes to fruition. If he doesn't practice today, then I'm a little bit, even in a limited fashion, then I'm a little bit worried about Lawrence.
Let's move on to our sleeper sneaky start of the week. John, I mentioned the league that we're in, and we use Sleeper. It is the one of the fastest growing customizable fantasy football platforms in the industry. If you head to sleeper.com or download the latest app today, you can check it out for yourself. John and I use it for our fantasy league, and we've used it the last couple of years. They make it easy to draft, whether doing a live draft or for our purposes. We do one where, we kind of play it off over the couple of days, but we really like it. We like the format, easy to move players in and out, and for me the website is very sleek and the app is very easy to use as well. So head to, again, sleeper.com or use the Sleeper app and check it out today. This week's sleeper sneaky start of the week, you chose a running back, and it's D'Onta Foreman of the Panthers.
Yeah, and I'd also like to give props to you right now. You're in second place in our league, headed to the playoffs, so that's exciting.
Thanks, John. If I may put myself down, though, this is the first time I think I've made the playoffs in our league, and I've been in it for about 8 years. But I appreciate the compliment.
Well,
my name is always rebuilding.
I was going to say your name is always rebuilding, but you can maybe change that. At this point.
Thank you.
D'Onta Foreman, and I should probably keep track of our sleeper sneaky starts of the week because I think the last couple have hit pretty well. But this week, D'Onta Foreman, great matchup against the Seahawks, 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. He has 4 100-yard games in his last 6 outings. The Seattle Seahawks have given up an average of 181 total yards, 5.23 yards per carry, 1.5 touchdowns to opposing backfield since week 9. So their run defense is just in the crapper, and this is the best way for Carolina to attack this defense by far, and probably smart to keep the Seattle passing game off the field as much as possible. I don't know how much Seattle is going to want to run the ball given their running back situation this week. So Foreman can control the game, and if he can get going, which I think he will.
All right, time for my personally my favorite time for the podcast, or favorite segment. It's our sneaky start segment. John Paulsen, if you go to 4for4.com, he wrote up week 14's sneaky starts. I almost went with the sleeper sneaky starts. He's got several different quarterbacks you can look at, several different running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. This, of course, is just your appetizer here on the podcast. But let's start off with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, somebody that people are not enamored with Kirk Cousins. I don't care how much bling he has, John, after wins. Nobody's enamored with him, but he does have an absolutely fantastic matchup against the Lions this Sunday.
Yeah, and you're such a pro that I could picture you at the dinner table just saying sleeper sneaky start of the week, sleeper sneaky start of the week over and over again, so that we didn't have any more mess ups with Chiefs.
Daddy, what are you doing? Don't worry about it.
Sleeper sneaky start of the week. Anyway, Kirk Cousins, and I almost picked Goff. So either one of these guys, I have them both written up. This is a great game to attack, as if you're looking for a streaming quarterback in a more shallow league. I don't think Cousins is available in a lot of 12-team leagues, but he might be. Goff as well. Detroit, 32nd adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, so the best matchup according to our AFPA metric. In the last 4 games, the Lions have given up an average of 24.8 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Obviously, the Vikings have the firepower. Detroit's defense is ascending a little bit. I mean, they are a little bit better in the last couple of weeks. Some teams have had kind of disappointing offensive outings against them, but I think Cousins will have a good game against Detroit. This should be a shootout.
Yeah, I think a lot of people in the DFS community were upset last week that Trevor Lawrence didn't have a bigger game, and even though he got hurt, he really wasn't doing anything. The quarterback to have had in your lineups last week would have been Jared Goff from a DFS standpoint. But somebody that connected well with Jared Goff was DJ Chark, the former Jaguar. You like him, or at least from a sleep. I always say this, from a sneaky start standpoint, you like him.
Yeah, and I think he's actually I would feel reasonably confident in him if I had to start him this week. It's you got 6 teams on bye, so he's higher in the rankings than usual. But he's coming off that 5 for 98 day against the Jaguars. I don't know how much of that was revenge, hashtag old team theorem type performance. I mean, that doesn't always pay off either. But he played a lot of snaps. Jameson Williams, was a non-factor, very They were very careful about getting him out there too much. They only played him a handful of snaps, so it doesn't appear. And given the way that they've treated DeAndre Swift this whole season through injury, I don't see the Lions, getting Jameson Williams out there for 40 routes anytime soon. And even if he does, it's probably going to be at the expense of Josh Reynolds and not DJ Chark, who's actually playing well. DJ Chark's playing well. Josh Reynolds not doing much at all. I think the matchup I like here is, Minnesota's secondary is pretty slow. Chark has 4.3 speed. I think that there's a chance for 1 or 2 deep passes here in this, in a shootout. Excuse me. And Chark should be on the receiving end of that. I mean, Williams has a chance as well to come out for 10 routes and do something. But I think Chark, with all his snaps and routes run, that he has the much better chance.
All right, tight end. This is always kind of everybody's always looking for tight ends, streaming options, DFS options. So what do you like about Hunter Henry on Monday night against the Cardinals?
Yeah, I was debating between Hunter Henry, who I can pronounce his name really easily, and Chig Okonkwo. I don't even know if I'm getting that right, but he's also go to the article and read my write-up on him. Don't listen to me talk about him. But he's a very interesting, for the Titans, interesting prospect in terms of their tight end of the future. So I think dynasty owners, if they haven't, or dynasty managers, if they haven't already looked at him, he's had 5 straight games, at least 30 yards receiving, but doing it on very low routes, and his snaps are increasing. Looks like he's taking over maybe as the Titans pass catching tight end. But Hunter Henry, I think, in a great matchup against Arizona. How many times have we been targeting the Cardinals tight ends for tight ends, and they're 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends. They've given up 6.9 catches for 73 yards, 0.75 touchdowns to the tight end position this year. Henry's been a little bit up and down, but he had a great game in his last favorable matchup, 3 for 63 and a touchdown against the Vikings.
I always go off sometimes, you call it like the YouTube rabbit hole. I always, I kind of do like a stats rabbit hole. And I wanted to know which defenses have given up 25 or more points per position this year in fantasy. For example, like the Cardinals, how many times have they given up 25 or more points in a week to a quarterback? And I think the Cardinals, I mean, I'll have to look at it, but the Cardinals popped in like everything. Quarterbacks, they've got, 4 or 5 times they've allowed 25 or more points. Wide receivers, they led in one category. Maybe I'll pull it up so I can pay off this tease, John. But the Cardinals have just been the gift that keeps on giving from a fantasy perspective. Last thing, John, we'll get into our breakout receiver model. If you go to 4for4.com, you could see the breakout receiver model. You could see all the wide receivers and tight ends that the model likes in a given week, but it's really important to read further, because we do give some context to why certain receivers might have better weeks than others. But John, from a week 14 standpoint, who are you seeing? What stands out?
Yeah, this is a good model. They don't always hit. These are players that are underperforming, but are getting usage of players that should be, fantasy starters, basically, especially the top 10 or 20 names that are there. And we do have starters that we run out there every week. And I love it when players that are typically good are and productive are near the top of that table. And Mike Evans, I feel like we've been talking about him for a month, but he's going to hit at some point. And he's getting the usage that he needs to get. His P10 efficiency is right around 100%, but he's underperforming his half PPR scoring by 8.4 points. And that's just unlike him. And it's really strange because you've got Tom Brady there. So the two have played together. There's no real reason for this not to be working. So I think at some point he's going to hit and have a big week. Jaylen Waddle, also underperforming by about 7 points on his 13.1 expected over the last 3 weeks. He's obviously a fantastic productive receiver. His P10 efficiency is 144. So I'm expecting a big game out of him soon. Mark Andrews, we didn't touch on him during the Baltimore discussion, but he's, I got some questions. Do we bench, Andrews because Huntley's in? But Huntley was actually a little bit better for Andrews. If you remember at the start of the season, we were, we're talking about drafting Andrews in the second round. There were some fantasy analysts saying, no, you shouldn't, because his numbers were inflated because of Tyler Huntley. So like there were some people that had numbers that said that, or it showed that. And he did do a little bit better in terms of targets and yards and stuff with Huntley, but obviously still a great fantasy tight end with Lamar Jackson at quarterback. But he underperforming right now by about 4.7 points per game on his 12.5 expected. And then finally, I wanted to mention Tyler Boyd, because he's always flies under the radar when Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are healthy. Higgins does have that hamstring injury, so a little bit of a question mark there. Maybe he has an in-game setback, and now you have Tyler Boyd in the number 2 role. But I think the big thing for him, not only does he, have an 8.6 expected versus a 5.3 actual, he's a 121% P10 efficiency, so he's a good player, or at least he was good in the 10 previous games prior to this 3-game span that we're looking at. But Hayden Hurst is injured. Looks like he's going to be out. So that is where it opens up maybe 2 to 3 extra targets for Boyd, because they don't treat their other tight ends like Hayden Hurst. So those guys are just out there blocking and running some routes against air. But Boyd could step in and have a good game pretty much anytime. So I like him as the last breakout receiver this week.
All right, great stuff, John. I did look up the numbers. I don't know if anybody else appreciated it, but I know you appreciate it, John. So I don't want to just kind of throw stuff out there and not back it up. So the Cardinals, again, this is just how many times a defense gave up 25 or more points to a player in a given week. The Cardinals have given up, and this I didn't compile it last week, but the Cardinals were also on bye last week. The Cardinals have allowed 5 different quarterbacks this year to rack up 25 or more points in fantasy. The Lions are the only other team to do so 5 times. Running backs, the Cardinals have done it 4 times. Four different running backs have gained 25 or more points against the Cardinals defense. The high is the Texans at 6. Again, not through last week, so bear that in mind. The wide receivers, Cardinals apparently don't give up a ton to wide receivers, at least from a 25-point standpoint. The Cardinals, in fact, have never allowed a wide receiver to gain 25 or more points in a given week. And then finally, and this is the thing that really popped out to me because we're talking about tight ends, and you had mentioned that, how many times have we targeted them? The Cardinals have allowed 3 different tight ends to score 25 or more points in fantasy in a given week. And you might say to yourself, well, 3, that's not bad. That's the high.
Yeah.
The Cardinals, there's no other team. Yeah, that is
that's not a position that regularly scores over 25. So right. I do think Hunter Henry is a good play this week.
Yeah, in fact, I thought about lowering that number to 20 and then kind of redoing the numbers for tight ends only. But John, you're absolutely right to target the Cardinals defense when it comes to the tight ends. So that's John Paulsen at 4for4_John. I'm at Anthony Stalter on Twitter. We appreciate everybody listening and viewing the podcast this week. Don't forget to check out 4for4.com. John's rankings are updated frequently, especially when it comes to injuries. John's sneaky starts, the article is up. We got our breakout receiver model. We got DFS content. We got betting content. So 4for4.com needs to be your first and only shop for your fantasy football playoffs and your fantasy football advice. See you next time on the Most Accurate Podcast.